welcome to everybody. Thank you for joining. This is our IWFM Lunch and Learn, IWFM Midlands Lunch and Learn webinar on practical approaches to water safety in collaboration with the Water Hygiene Centre. This is a CPD event. The number is 172415. Now, you're not expected to remember that. We'll give that again at the end and we'll put the number on the screen so that you can make a note of it for your reference and for your CPD records. If you want to make a note of that, then, and also if you want to, if you're an IWFM member, you can also go onto your account and print a CPD certification at the end as well. I can run through that. So, as we're all aware, Legionella control and management is an important, crucial area of legal compliance that FMs, and more often than not, play a really crucial role in. Legionnaires' disease is a serious lung infection similar to pneumonia that can be developed from inhaling fine water droplets contaminated with Legionella bacteria. Fortunately, with the correct and suitable and sufficient management of water systems, it is completely preventable. However, it is important that we demonstrate and record the good management practices that are in place to safeguard all employees, visitors, and others to our commercial premises that we are responsible for maintaining. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our facilitator for today's session. I'll just give a little bit of an intro to Peter Tyson, who is Commercial Director for the Water Hygiene Centre. Pete has extensive experience with water systems and waterborne pathogens. With 20 years in the water treatment industry, Pete has worked as a service engineer, sales engineer, regional manager, and regional director for some of the major hygiene companies within the industry. His experience is gleaned from being involved in the Legionella outbreak in 2002 at Barrow Cumbria, to managing contracts at nuclear power stations, to presenting and being responsible for the role of responsible person, also delivering responsible person training. His experience and knowledge of specific areas bridges many market sectors. So we're in good hands today. Pete was co-author of an article published for the Chartered Institute of Environmental Health, discussing COVID-19 return to work and the actions to be undertaken on businesses reopening after the pandemic. Pete, welcome. Thank you very much for leading our session today.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for the introduction. Much appreciated. Is it over to me?
Yes, sorry, over to you. Yeah, I should have said that.
I'm going to feel like Chris Whitty and Sir Patrick Vallance in a moment by saying next slide, please, next slide, please, next slide, please. So that's the first one. Next slide. Brilliant. Thank you very much. So this is a practical approach towards safety. And the title of this session came about when a client said they wanted to learn more about the practical aspects, something more to learn from the practical for their training, really. And I thought, great, to get out the pens and papers and crayons and pens and brushes and paintbrushes and whatnot, I'll paint a picture of practical experiences where things have been found to be wrong. And you can't get more practical than that, I suppose. So we're going to oversee a number of situations that have been put in place or had in place across multiple sectors. And the water hygiene experience with healthcare, local government, universities, housing associations, most examples detailed within this come from the healthcare, but it's non-healthcare can't learn from these experiences as well. Can you remember the next slide? And we've probably seen these types of situations before. We've seen these photographs, the crazy health and safety photographs. And this practical approach towards safety presentation is along similar lines as these, albeit not as obvious, I guess. I mean, I was demonstrating some of the things we've found with water systems, i.e. how not to do it. Next slide. Please. We're going to talk about the following elements, and this is starting at the very beginning, and this is from a design perspective, all the way through to record keeping. So we're going to look at the design and install, the components, the safety aspect, the contamination, temperature monitoring, sampling, and ultimately record keeping. On the next slide is basically a schematical line diagram of the design and install. That's it, perfect. And let's start at the very beginning and get it right at the design stage. I was saying this a lot throughout the course or throughout the session, and get it right first time. The GIVI initiative is something that is really key at the design stage, and that's getting to the fundamentals of how we design a water system and the implications that come from somebody who's less experienced with water hygiene management from a Legionella perspective and waterborne pathogen perspective, as opposed to somebody who wants to design a water system. And I suppose the question is how many organisations have a water safety group? How many organisations have a water safety group with the project team representation? And is there a water safety group that have to read the intended plans and sign these documents off? So what I'm trying to say there is in the design phase, there is a design document, design documentation, and that document needs to be reviewed by the water safety team, by somebody who's experienced with water safety, Legionella management, waterborne pathogen management, and ensure that it doesn't get to the end user as a basically not a great design and install. I'm going to say something else there, but you get my point. Experience with a project where a specialist water system was installed in the middle of the building on the boosted water supply, which served all the cold water outlets. And this not having a dedicated water supply meant that future maintenance, disinfecting of the boosted water would be detrimental to the specialist water system, including the installation of alternative water treatment strategies such as copper, chlorine dioxide, and copper sulfur ionization. And HSG 274 Part 2, paragraph 2.4 details stagnation of the water system during construction as being a potential issue for biofilm formation, and as such, 2 times weekly flushing alone will not suffice. Contractors do not appreciate that water sat around only being flushed twice a week presents a risk, especially when they've left site. So the key there is how is the actual process designed? How are we going to go through the implications of doing a commission clean, for example, maintaining flushing records, and whilst it's being charged with full of water, still due to get handed over, has it got sufficient flushing regimes? Have it got sufficient management processes in place to ensure that we are not left holding that baby? If you go to the next slide, that would be grand. So we see lots of organisations that have refurbishments or installs looking like this, where on the left-hand side photograph, anybody can spot where the error is, but it's not a capped off supply. So there's obviously an opportunity for detritus, airborne particulates, contamination to occur there. And on the right-hand side of the photograph there, the middle outlet is not being bagged. So it's again open to the environments and open to other sorts of contamination. And these are fixtures and fittings, pipework, valves, taps, TMBs. It should be kept free from debris and possible contamination through the delivery to site, storage on site, and installation. Open ends on pipework on components that are not kept sealed will invariably suffer ingress of debris and contamination. Okay, next slide, please. Hospital water refurb. 75% of returns are not balanced, circulating. So pseudomonas aeruginosa and Legionella positive positives are plenty. Contractor had to come back put right 2 years after the work was completed. The ward was closed for 2 months. Poor configuration was the issue. Position of returns, balancing of system, strainers and filters had biofilms in there. Who was the culprit? The design and build contractor. And again, if we can get this right at the design stage, the competency of contractors needs to be key. Evidence of performance at handover needs to be key. So we need to evidence that the system is functioning. We had evidence that the system is clean. It's had flushing records. It's had the desired sampling procedures in place to ensure that that handover occurs smoothly. And the issue really is, I suppose, if we get it right first time, as in we have the right design, we haven't got a multitude of TMVs where they're no longer required or not required. At the end of the day, the design house who surveys and designs the system may be adverse to risk of install potential, but they unfortunately may not understand the risks associated from leaving a perspective about how many an excess of TMVs requires an excess of service fail-safe strip downs on location for biofilm to form, and obviously behind that biofilm, waterborne pathogens can live and breathe quite nicely. Okay, next slide, please. Perfect. And this is just something that we see on a regular basis, and this is pipework ladling. And as you can see on the left-hand side, we've got hot water supply flow, follows that path there, and then past that valve there, it becomes the heating return. Now we know that that can't be the case, so we've just got to make sure that from inception to handover, things are done properly and are absolutely correct as they should be. Next slide, please. We've also had some strange sort of things being installed to try and assist with whatever the requirements are of site. And this one, on the left-hand side, this sort of large radiator system was there to dry towels after the shower was used in the morning. And somebody jumped in there and said, "Oh, could you give us a hot water to a certain time where I can hang my towel in the morning?" And this contractor subsequently did. And actually, that's going to cause a bit of a problem from flow, also from length of system pipework, why we need some pipework, etc., etc. And obviously, it's a nice to have, but not a very good methodology of controlling and managing your water system.
Hi, sorry to interrupt. I'm really sorry to interrupt. We're getting quite a few comments through the Q&A feedback about some background noise.
Okay.
I don't know if I just wanted to check that everybody is on mute, and if there's any sort of background noise where you are, Pete, because I think people are struggling to on clarity to hear you because the background noise is kind of coming through.
Yeah, no problem. I just I think we've got a break for lunch, so just bear with me 1 second.
No worries. Thank you very much.
We will.
Thank you everyone for your patience as well.
Sorry about that, folks. On the right-hand side, you can see that there is a shower, and that shower can has got a bit of potential for cross-contamination. That shower should not be able to hit a basin of a sink, and it should not be able to hit the floor. So whatever's on the floor, whatever's in the basin of the sink can be transferred to the shower. So it's also a regulatory issue, but predominantly from a water hygiene perspective, we're looking at the cross-contamination from where that shower head and hose can actually be located. Okay. Next slide, please. We also come across various different types of pipework, and I don't know if anybody's aware, but these flexible hoses, they're predominantly used because it's easier to put a flexible hose onto a sink, and the tails of taps, etc., going quite nicely with that. Well, in essence, those flexible hoses are a fantastic breeding ground for biofilm. And rubber is a great source, a great location for biofilms to breed on. And the internals of those flexible hoses are rubber. And even though they are RAS approved, the suggestion, the recommendation would be to get them hard plumbed in where necessary and where possible. So in future refurbs, future designs, rather than use flexible hoses, the advice would be to use a hard plumb pipework in. And again, just due to the risk factor with the rubber and the biofilm formation. And then on the right-hand side, we've got a photograph there with a TMT, and underneath the TMT, underneath the sink, you can see that there is a TMV. So basically, we've got two things doing the same job. So in essence, at the bottom there, we've got a thermostatic mixing valve. That thermostatic mixing valve will need to go through the cleans, the strip down, the disinfection process, to be serviced and regularly serviced. But in essence, it's redundant because the TMT is doing its job. So in essence, there we've got a location for biofilm to form quite readily. And again, that's a design aspect that we could do with engineering out. We engineer the issues out, we remove the risk, we reduce the risk, and we're managing that risk slightly better. Next slide, please. We've also got these sorts of photographs that we see on a regular basis. So these are pressure vessels. And that pressure vessel is rubber, internal rubber diaphragm. And on the right hand side, you can see that rubber diaphragm, which has been ripped open and sampled and swabbed. And you can probably see that there is a large volume of biofilm forming in the bladder. And these pressure vessels have now got a suggestion that we either have a flow-through pressure vessel or expansion vessel, a flow-through expansion vessel, or a what we used to call and still do, is a Legionella, an anti-Legionella valve. And it doesn't mean if you install one of these valves, you're free from Legionella. It means that it's actually encouraging flow through that expansion vessel. And the more flow we've got through that expansion vessel, the less likely of stagnation and biofilm proliferation. So again, any pressure vessels which have just got to flow in, they need to be changed and upgraded to flow through, or with an anti-Legionella valve installed to encourage flow through that expansion vessel. Next slide, please. Okay, so when we take taps apart, valves apart, TMVs apart, this is what they can look like. And there's lots and lots of different locations on these valve strainers where debris can build up, sediment can build up, and obviously with that becomes there's a food source there available, there's a location, a house, a home for Legionella bacteria to sit and proliferate, and it's an ideal breeding ground. Hence the reason why they need to be removed, cleaned, disinfected on a frequent basis or as required. Next slide, please. And we are looking at the design and install components now. And this is again, get it right at the design stage, right first time. If it's installed correctly, it reduces the risk and reduces the impact on the maintenance aspects moving forward. If we remove the design risk, we do not buy a car that needs 3 litres of oil every day. The competency of those designing, probably not enough deaths from Legionella disease each year to warrant sufficient training for the design houses, for example. And then we've got to make sure that the water safety group is involved, review the plans, the risk assess. Is there a TMV needed? Designers are risk averse, as I mentioned earlier, and put them everywhere, where in fairness, they probably could do with being less used. If we can just click that. Right forward, please. Yeah, perfect. We're looking at the ALOP side of things, so as low as reasonably practical. Yeah, we've got best practice, we've got good practice, we've got conventional practice, and we've got outdated practice. All the British standards and guides, contracts are not necessarily up to date. The approved code of practice, British Standard 855A 2015, quoted as standard for system disinfection. But in fairness, 2015 revision of 8558 saw its own British standard for disinfection, which is a PB 855486 document. So sometimes we use outdated information, which again needs to go through the water safety group and make sure that design and that process, risk assessment method statements about the commissioning phases all tie into the more modern methodologies. And the project plan, when is the handover, and when is the handover due, and can we work back to include the commissioning and evidence of sampling and there's sufficient time to fix any areas of concern. But one of the things that does happen in lots and lots of cases is the fact that they sample at the 11th hour, and if those samples come back not quite as good as what we anticipated, then there's got to be some remediation to occur, and that is often not figured into the timeframes. Okay, next slide, please. Now, this is about safe access, and as we can tell on the right hand side, there is access to the top of the tank, top of the cold water storage tank, which is situated outside with no locks. There's what looks like easy access. Now, do we deem that to be safe? Obviously not. So any Tom, Dick or Harry could go up on there and do whatever they need to do. There's lots of things that could happen. And I suppose the key there is the potential for malicious contamination. We need to consider the safety of that water. And this is detailed in HTML 401 Part B, and should be included with any water safety plan. What is the safety of a potential for malicious contamination within your water systems. Okay, next slide, please. And this is about the point of use filter. On the left hand side, you can see that point of use filter is cracked. Is it therefore effective? And would it be doing its job? The obvious answer is no, it wouldn't. So water from the supply would obviously be contaminating the outlet itself from the bottom side of things. So that filter is in replacement. And on the right hand side there, we can see the filter has been taken off. Now, why would people take a filter off an outlet? Well, maybe the pressure, or maybe they didn't understand what it was. Maybe they just didn't know. Maybe it's been taken off the cleaning and not been put back on. I just don't know. But those are again things that we come across on a regular basis, and those are the things that need to be managed well. And if there is a situation like that, what is the action to be taken by the person who next uses that basin? Okay, next slide, please. Perfect. And no doubt we've all come across locations within the workplace and our own domestic dwellings where we have infrequently used outlets. These infrequently used outlets can often be used as storage rooms, storage cupboards. We can be putting things in there. On the right hand side, you can see that shower has not been, looks as though it's not been used for some time. But also, what is the problem with the left hand side? Well, we've got mop heads in a basin, and the mop head is unfortunately touching the outlet of the tap, which incurs cross-contamination. Again, whatever was on the floor being mopped up is now potentially within the water system, or at least at the outlets of that particular one. And again, who's involved in that sort of thing? Is it the cleaners, domestic people? What is it who is it that's doing that? Why? And what are the actions that need to be undertaken to ensure that that does not happen in the future? Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so we're talking about inappropriate, in the picture on the left hand side, we're talking about inappropriate installation. And the backflow issue, contravention of water regs. And we've seen similar already with the shower heads and hoses reaching the wash hand basin. And on the right hand side there, we've got a photograph of little used outlets in appropriate use. Healthcare workers, HTML4 1.B details training that those can impact on the water system. So I suppose we've got to make sure that the people who actually, during the commissioning phase, they use the outlets and ensure that sufficient flushing is utilised. And also, once it's in use, are the people trained in regional awareness to ensure that the little used outlets aren't used as a storage facility, for example. Okay, next slide. We've also got a little bit of a backflow issue here on the left hand side with the point of use filter, which is below the spill level of the wash hand basin. So that's causing another problem. And then on picture 2, obviously we've got inappropriate use for the wash hand basin, lots of used outlets, medical devices stored, and who was taking responsibility for that location. Okay, next slide, please. So now we're looking at the contamination aspect. So it means personal health issues, screening, all requirements of HTML4 want to complete a health screening as part of training, for example. But who does health screening of the individuals on their premises? And it's almost like if we've got a cooling tower. Can you stop people breathing in and around your cooling tower? Can you stop people breathing in and around your domestic systems? Can you stop susceptible people using your domestic systems? Can you stop susceptible people going on site? No, you can't stop people breathing. You can't give them all P3 mask, which would be the mask that can remove 5 micron. So we can't give people masks. We can't stop people using our facilities, and we don't do health screening. So from my side of things, the best way to manage it is really the multiplication and obviously the aerosols being produced. But aerosols and keeping things clean. But from a domestic process, the simple things are keep it hot, the cold, keep it clean, keep it all moving, and keep it well managed. And this goes across a number of sort of scenarios, from cleanliness of tools. Do we do cross-contamination? Do we disinfect tools? Do we disinfect pieces of equipment that are going in, new taps, new bits of pipe work? For example, do those things occur? Okay, next slide, please. And then we're looking at temperature monitoring. So does your water safety plan, your written scheme, define your method for taking a temperature and calibration method of thermometers, for example? Those who take temperatures, have they been trained in the defined method? So everyone thinks it's relatively straightforward to take a temperature of something, but unless you've got experience using the methodology of how you're taking that temperature, and there are different things that need to be considered. If you could just go to the next slide. For example, domestic hot water needs to be stored at a flow of greater than 60 degrees C, return at greater than 55 degrees C in healthcare environment, and return at 50 degrees C in every other environment. Cold water storage, for example, going to be stored at less than 20 degrees C, but how are we actually taking those temperatures? Do we link it to temperature gauges and clarifiers? When was the last time we actually calibrated a temperature gauge? When was the last time we actually calibrated our temperature gauge or temperature our thermometers, for example, and have they been calibrated to UCAS accreditation? So we're looking at how the CPs are trained from a contact probe. From a contact probe, we need a heat sink. We need the heat sink grease and that lubricant, which adds 3 to 6 degrees centigrade difference with this use of product. It therefore is a better, more accurate reading. We've also got to make sure that we understand how, go to the next slide, please. We've also got to make sure we understand the infrared probe. And the fact you can just click all those, that will be grand, thank you. Perfect. And there's an infrared probe on the top there, as you can see, we're pointing it to the wall. Second photograph where it says 27.1 degrees C. It's reading 27.1 degrees C. On the next photograph, it looks as though we're taking somebody's temperature there. The infrared laser is hitting a location, somebody's finger. So what temperature would we be anticipating from that laser, which would be around the body temperature, 35.5 to 36.9, I think it is. And on the right hand side there, the actual laser is a couple of centimeters above where the finger is, and it's therefore reading incorrectly. So where you put your laser has an impact on the actual reading. And also we need a tape. We need a bit of black tape for the location where we're taking the temperature, because that's got an emissivity of 0.65, I believe. And that black tape reduces the amount of reflection from a metal surface. So there's a few things that have got to be in place to ensure that the infrared laser is reading correctly and reading accurately. Okay, next slide, please. And then we look at the gauges. So the BMS systems, we've got no doubt gauges on our cylinders, and we've got temperature monitoring at various locations on our BMS system. What about the records for the BMS system? Are the records saved? Are the records accurate? Have they been calibrated recently? What happens if the information that we're gathering isn't correct? Do we have a process in place to actually manage that? Who reads the instruction manual on the BMS system? Okay, next slide, please. From a temperature monitoring perspective, where do we take the temperatures? If the recirculation system equals not at the central outlet, but the central point, i.e. the return loop feed. Return loops are the hidden elements of the systems where traditionally have not been measured or checked. Although 2014 revision of HSG2 sub-4 Part 2 and the 2016 revision of HTML4 Part B. We need to identify these loops and then ID how it's best to take the temperatures, whether we do that manually or monitoring connections, BMS, or any other e-monitoring systems. There's things to consider there are accessibility, cost, and time. So with a system like this, we're looking at multiple locations for temperature monitoring. Is it best to have somebody manually going around, or is it best to have a monitoring system in place? That again is up for debate and for discussion. Okay, next slide, please. And then we've got the documentation that we're looking at from a sampling for lesional bacteria in water systems. And the water safety plan within the written schemes should define sampling methodology, and the guidance on how to take samples exist. The blue book from the EE is available. It's free, sorry, and the British Standard 7592 is costs a few pounds. But the water safety plan, the written scheme, details sampling strategy and the need to use accredited labs. Okay, next slide, please. And that written scheme is to details the action to take with positives. So if the minority of the samples are negative or positive, then we take a look at resampling and maybe take a look at our written scheme or safety plan. If the results are majority of positive, then we look at doing some form of disinfection process or flushing regime or increasing our secondary control regime, maybe if we have one in place, or we look at doing a pasteurization process. So this document is key for what is required and identifying the remedial actions and how we go about investigation in a sampling process. But again, this goes back to the design and install. So how many samples at the design and install phase are budgeted into the cost of the entire project through construction to handover? So it's not a case of just taking at the end of the install. We should be taking some samples. We should be taking on a frequent basis. We should also be performing a water risk assessment at A, the design, and B, the installation, and C, the handover. And all of these things need to be in place to ensure that we've got control program in place again to ensure that handover is smooth and is free from any further issues. Okay, next slide, please. But from a sampling perspective, there's a certain criteria that we shouldn't do. We do not multiply volumes up. We do not use a Newcastle lab. We do not use untrained individuals. We do not flame the outlets. And we do not take Legionella and Pseudomonas aeruginosa samples at the same time from the same outlet. And this is about taking flow samples, pre and post sampling processes. And this again is going to be defined within the management plan. Again, the design phase, handover stage, and then the ongoing phase from once it's been handed over. Okay, next slide, please. And then we've got sort of information on documentation. So this is about record keeping. And that record keeping needs to be quite robust. So we've got to be confident that those records are being kept well. A, they're being performed accurately. The people who are doing that recording of the information are doing them correctly. So have they been trained to a standard? Are they deemed being competent? And being trained is different to being competent. So obviously we can do a training program, but the older lesson was on the training program, how competent are they from that point onwards? So that competency matrix needs to be reviewed and make sure they understand and are regularly refreshed of why they are doing things. But the information that should be readily available from the record keeping aspects could be details such as the dates, who was doing it, the thermometer calibration number, etc., etc. So if you could just next slide, please, or next click. The middle one is something that we see on a regular basis, which is partly filled in, and it looks to the sort of untrained eye that looks okay. Things are in place, things are being done. But if you analyze that a little bit further down, it says are all acceptable, yes or no, and they've all ticked to yes. Whereas you can see on the left hand side, there's a temperature gauge that's broken. The return temperature is less than 50 degrees C. It's running at 48. So there's a few things there that are not quite right. Compare that one to the one on the right, which has got a little bit more information on. It's got the calibration, thermometer calibration number. It's got a thermometer number. It's got the actual dates. It's got names, signature. It's got the correct information there. So let's have a look at line item number 2 at 12:45. It looks as though the temperature of the cylinder, the hot water cylinder, is slightly low. That person then returned at 13:10. And the temperature of that cylinder was at 61 degrees C. So it's indicative of a high use during the lunch break. And that person then went back, allowed that hot water cylinder to get back up to temperature and took a retest and confirmed that system was running in adequate condition. As we can see there, at the bottom, details of any corrective actions were taken. Number 2, checked after lunch, temperature was okay. Point number 3, temperature gauge is broken, reported, needs replacing. The one thing that would improve that even further would be to put a name reported to whom and when, and needs replacing by when. But again, that they may not know that information. So as good as we can get, maybe as good as we'd like them, there's always room for improvement on every single thing we do. Okay, next slide, please. This is just one that the managing director likes. This is wrong on so many levels. Next slide, please. It's a little joke. And then this is just a little bit of a lesson to be learned. So this particular outbreak is the HSE investigated HP Boulder and Nalco. There was 26 cases, 2 deaths. This was back in 2003. And the client and the contractor were both fined £300,000 each. The client didn't check the work completed by the contractor. So both organisations were found at fault for assuming that the contractor was doing their job, but also the contractor was contracted to do a job and they didn't. So both parties were liable and at fault. And again, the responsibility of regional management lies with the user, if you will, not the subcontractor. So no matter what, we think we have got to keep a tight rein on subcontractors performing works on our behalf. Okay, next slide, please. Or next lecture, take. So who is actively checking work completed by contractors? Can we wholeheartedly say that we do a thorough review on an annual basis to make sure our contractors or subcontractors are performing the work that they've been contractually obliged to do? Please. And this was Hospital Trust find police and control failings. It was Brighton and Sussex University Hospitals. And the failings were systemic and continued over a period of time. There was a history of Legionella problems at the home, which was formerly known as Tamfield Care Home. And the monitoring, checking and flushing tasks were given to the home's handyman, who was inadequately trained and supervised. There was no system in place to cover for him when he was away, so that the requisite checks were not done. And the Legionella training for the key personnel at the Willows was significantly below the standard required, and there were inadequate temperature checks, and some of those done with respect to thermostatic mixing valves were done incorrectly. Showers were not descaled and disinfected water as required, and the flushing of little used outlets was reliant on one member of staff. There was no procedure for this to be done in the absence of that member of staff. Okay, so who has a training matrix or training needs matrix that is reviewed by the Water Safety Group and training service on a proactive basis? And what I mean by that is to make sure that all of our staff are involved in hygiene management, they've got the adequate training, whether that's an hour awareness sort of training, or whether it's more of the responsible person, budget person, or does the duty holder actually understand what their aims is in the grand scheme of regional management. Okay, next slide, please. As I mentioned, who's actively checking work completed by the CPs and resolving. Okay. Okay, so this could be Reading Council. No, do apologise. I think I've just jumped to the case. Yes, I have. So, yeah, sorry. Let's go back a slide if you can. Apologies. And one more. Okay. Okay, that's right. Yeah, sorry. This is 2011. One death in Brighton Sussex Hospital, NHS Foundation Trust, and this was between October 10 and November 11. There's 114 positive LP samples, 651 records of non-compliant temperatures. And the chlorine dioxide unit at 5 sites failed to dose correctly, and there was no adequate action recorded for any of these failings. So again, sorry, my point there was who was actively checking work completed by CPs and resolving. So next slide, please. Perfect. And next slide. And that was the one that discussed in a bit of detail. This was the failings were systemic and continual period of time. Okay, so again, who has a training needs matrix that is reviewed by the Water Safety Group and training delivered? Next slide. Perfect. And the final one should be Royal United Hospitals Bath. And this is an annex to William Budd Ward. It's a separate loop. It's an annex constructed in 2009. And temperature checks and tests of Legionella have not been carried out. The annex had issues with water systems and Legionella bacteria was found. The strain of Legionella found was not the same Legionella that killed Mr. Buck, but the HSE concluded that there was sufficient evidence to prosecute the trust in exposing patients to risk from Legionella bacteria in its water systems. So there was one death, there was no monitoring, there was strain of lesion element, the same strain as unfortunately what killed us books. But due to inadequate documentation, they were found due to poor records being kept. There's another case as well, which was G4S. G4S had a member of their in their employment who came back from a holiday. They were diagnosed with Legionnaires' disease, and obviously that started an investigation. And that investigation concluded that there was a poor management of their documentation, and got a fine for £1.8 million. It was linked to another issue with their, unfortunately, linked to another issue with their electrical systems. So both systems got a fine of £900,000, and it is not based on, unfortunately, your fines are now linked to revenue and not profit. So whatever revenue you turn over, there is a potential for a higher fine allocated to the revenue, not the profit, if that makes sense. Okay, next slide, please. So here are the risk assessment review matrix to capture change of systems, and how they then included within your management plan. Perfect. Next slide, please. And this was the Barrow outbreak. So there was a number of lessons to be learned from Barrow. There was number one was communication responsibility. So they had ineffective communication. There was no lines of responsibility. There was a failure to act on information being provided. So the maintenance manager within the Barrow council was did actually do a thorough job, inform the relevant parties of what the issues were, and unfortunately those relevant parties didn't take any notice of that. There was a number of risk assessments that were outdated. There was no action taken on back of risk assessments. Contractors weren't doing their jobs. There was training and resources issues. There was no adequate training. Nobody given adequate training, and the resources weren't made available for adequate training. And then there was individual failings. And unfortunately, that's a poor photograph of Gillian Beckingham, but that is the lady who unfortunately was the first ever person to initially be charged with corporate manslaughter, which was initially found guilty of health and safety breaches. So back in 2002, she was fined a personal fine of £15,000, and the council was fined £135,000 due to the 7 deaths at Barrow. Okay, next slide, please. And this is between 2017 and 2018. Unfortunately, we haven't got up-to-date data to give a more recent information. And the reason being is because that information stopped being recorded in March 2020 due to the COVID outbreak. The records for regional outbreaks with the outbreaks we officially fired at the moment in time. And we are now recording that data again, but we haven't anticipated in fairness, it's now done by Noids, which is a subsidiary of Public Health England, and the numbers aren't quite as what we once were. So there's some reasoning behind that. But as we can see, in the summer months, the bacteria is more prevalent. July, August, September. But again, there is not a month where there is no risk associated to it. And the key area there is over the last fair few years, the number of cases has increased. So what could be the reason and the rationale behind the number of cases increase, or the reasons and rationale behind our cases are increasing? I read an article yesterday which was talking about clean air and how clean air has got a potential to increase the risk of Legionella bacteria coming from a cooling tower and travelling a lot further. The industry standard from the Legionella, an aerosol being transferred to a person was between 1 and 2 miles, but there was a case in northern France where that aerosol we believe to have travelled up to 8 kilometres, 5 miles. On this paper that I read yesterday was talking about an average now it's 7.4 kilometres in regards to how far that aerosol can travel from a cooling tower. But yeah, there's a number of reasons why the number of cases could potentially be increasing. But I'm going to again sound like Chris Whitty and property balance. And that is because the more people we test, the more we are going to find. So the more tests that are occurring on patients, the more we are going to find. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. And next slide, please. Finally, this is the sort of documentation that we look at to make sure that we've got competent personnel, Legion and Control Association, certificate of registration, and then obviously we've got a UCAS accreditation aspect in line to risk assessments, and obviously we're on the LCA, and there's lots of different organisations that are on this LCA, and you've got to make sure that the water safety group is satisfied of the competency of the risk assessor, evidence of experience, and possibly an interview. And the LCA has got 300+ members who are registered to deliver risk assessments. Which one do you pick? How do you filter further? And what are the standards that we already use? Well, we already know we use UCAS for lab samples and UCAS certification for commodities. And there are only currently 15 companies registered to deliver UCAS accredited risk assessments. And the Hygiene Centre is one of them. There's British standards that are being revised on a regular basis. The British standard 8580. There's lots of other documentation that tells us how to do a risk assessment, but that risk assessment needs to be, and the 8580 document was there to make sure it was a little bit more hand in glove and less clinical work driven, if you will, so less examples of when the first outbreak of Legionnaires' disease occurred, and more to the point, and a little bit more finite on recommendations and what can be done and what should be done, or what can be done, or could potentially be done. And next slide, please. And you'll have heard me talk about many documents during this whole process. There's a list of the documents that I've mentioned there, going to the Scottish Health and Technical Memorandum. For example, we're talking about British Standard 8558, Guide to the Design, Installation, Testing and Maintenance of Line Water Systems, British Standard EN 806, etc., and the 8580 documents. So again, it's worth just taking a look at those documents when you can, making sure that the relevant parties have access to them when you apply it. Okay, next slide, please. And this is the final one. And this is basically just to say thank you very much for listening. I do apologise for any background noise at the start there. Hopefully it's subsided. Weekly blogs, we follow us if you want to receive weekly blogs on the management and control of water hygiene and Legionnaires' disease. We post them on a regular basis. They are purely learning blogs. They're not about selling anything. They're not about what services we offer. They are purely about situations and incidents and updates and what is new in the water hygiene world. And suggested useful blogs are the Water Safety Group, which explains a little bit more about the Water Safety Group, and then what is an authorising engineer, and also what is competent health. And there's a few there that may be of interest, and also when do we do a risk assessment review, etc. And we've also got a YouTube channel for various things such as videos on how to take temperature monitoring, sampling for Legionella, sampling for Pseudomonas, qualifying internal inspection, not flushing of the used outlet. So there's a whole myriad of information can be gained and gleaned for free. And again, that's all I can help with. So that is the end of the presentation. Have we got any questions, I guess?
We do indeed, Pete. Thank you very much for that. Very informative. There's a lot of information there to go through. So I'd encourage people to listen back over to the webinar as well. But really appreciate that you're obviously well versed and well practiced in keeping to the timings. Thank you very much. Just a couple of questions here for you, Pete. Can you advise if there are any associated risks with having heavily coated internal pipe work from Cu, so copper, /Ag, so silver ionization, within large systems, and advise how to remove this? Any works on the system results in a lot of discoloration and blocked stainers, etc.
Okay, with all supplementary measures, again, they work sometimes in some locations and they're not so good in other locations. Can I take that person's detail, or could they contact me on a separate note?
Have we got your? Are you okay if we share your email, Pete?
Yeah, of course.
I'm not sure whether we had it at the beginning or not. If I shared the email with the, I've not said the person's name just in case they didn't want to be mentioned. So I'll send over your email address.
Yeah, perfect.
Let me just do a quick screenshot so I don't miss it. There we go. The other question, we've got two other questions here that are really good ones. In regards of removal of flexi hoses,
Yes.
can you confirm? Okay, hang on a second. My screen's just frozen. Sorry, can you confirm if it's a recommendation or if it's a legal requirement to do that? Because obviously we know that there's RAS approved, like you mentioned, in
there is, yeah.
presentation, flexi hoses, etc. But you mentioned about remove them wherever possible, kind of thing.
Yes, great question. So ideally they need to be RAS approved flexible hoses, which again ticks a box in essence to the domestic systems. From a future ongoing recommendation would be to hard plumb it in. And the answer to the question is it's a recommendation of best practice. So if I was to say to you that one of the people who helped write the approved code of practice, Dr. Tom Makin, he removed all of his 2,000 flexible hoses at a local his NHS trust. It's a best practice.
Okay, would you say it'd be more risk kind of associated into what I mean by that in terms of the type of environment and vulnerable people, for instance, like a hospital, like you were just mentioning there?
The vulnerability, absolutely, I totally agree, Sarah. Yeah, the vulnerability of the patients and the people would dictate how often you change them over. It's not to say that you can't use them, it's just going to make sure that they are in fit for purpose and they are being maintained. So it may be a case of, okay, the flexible hoses, we're going to change them every 4 years.
That's great. Thank you. That's really good advice. Hopefully that answers that person's question. Another good one, specific to leisure centres is, well, it's a leisure centre based question, but it could be anywhere actually. This situation could occur anywhere. Is there a tolerance for stored hot water temperatures? According to our BMS, it is above 60 degrees Celsius. Sorry, monitor's just frozen again. Most of the time it's above 60 degrees Celsius, but sometimes it drops during periods of heavy usage, which is understandable. We are a leisure centre and it may drop between 55 and 60 for perhaps 2 to 3 hours during the day, during busy times specifically.
Sure. As long as we can guarantee that the circulation of that cylinder, that hot water cylinder, is at 60 degrees C plus for an hour per day, then we are in a good state of repair. Ideally, we want it above 60 degrees C permanently, but I'm well aware that maybe that system was designed for fewer people working in the leisure centre, and then at high usage times it just drops below its desired. But again, what we're doing there is we're ensuring that we know that there is an increase in usage, so that it's avoiding stagnation, and as long as it's above 60 degrees C for an hour within that 24-hour period, it's okay.
Okay, fantastic. Would you say that there is a tolerance within that?
What do you mean?
So a five degree hit, like plus or minus, or is it just what you said about the within the time frame?
That's a great question. So can you guarantee that your BMS system is accurate? Is it being calibrated recently? If you are seeing 55 degrees C at your outlets whilst high usage is occurring, then that's, in my opinion, that would be still okay, because Legionella bacteria above 45 start to die off in, I think it's within 60 degrees centigrades, 60 degrees C, lives for a few seconds. Within 50 degrees C, I think it's a few minutes. So the likelihood of Legionella bacteria being prevalent at that temperature, once you've had your 60 degrees C previously, if you will, is low.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you very much for that, Peter. I'm just gonna check if we've got any other questions. Okay, yeah, we do. What do we do with boxed in pipe work that's tiled over with no access to TMVs, thermostatic mixing valves? For servicing purposes, can you chemically dose?
Okay, now that's just unfortunate. In an ideal world, and I would suggest that we replumbed. If that is not feasible, and there's a TMV that has been tiled over and is not accessible, you could look at doing a injection process on a regular basis. The problem with that is that the buyer side would need to get to every part of that TMV, and if there was some severe blockages within that TMV or areas of biofilm, and depending on the chemistry that you're using, it may not have access to get to the biofilm and to get to the bacteria behind the biofilm. So I suppose there's no answer I can give you for a definitive answer there, but it would need a bit of thinking about. So again, I could potentially assist that person with a bit more time on that question.
Okay, thank you. I wonder whether there's a possibility, just playing devil's advocate, if there's a possibility to cut an access hatch in there. Appreciate there's some tiles over there.
Yeah.
That could be an option if it's feasible. But like you say, the person is anonymous. But if you're happy for me to share your email at the end to all delegates, then hopefully you'll be able that person who's asked that question should be able to pick up with you offline if that's okay.
Yep.
Perfect. I am going to leave it there because we've got 2 minutes and I've got a few slides to run through. So we have got some other questions that have come through. So we'll collate them. Lauren at HQ will collate those for us in the background and share those with Pete, and then they'll be circulated at the end. So as I mentioned at the beginning, the CPD number for this event is on the screen right now. So if you want to take a note of that really quickly before we move on, because we've probably got about 1 minute, 30 seconds left. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we've got a lot of virtual training courses, so they can be built around a really busy work schedule and personal life. There's here are the list of upcoming courses that we have, also upcoming events. We've got some upcoming events that are both webinar, so you can dial in like a lunch and learn like this one, with the island region, like you've joined us with the Midlands region today, and also a guide there on career paths, and also the charity ball, which is a really great networking event for really good purpose. Thank you very much. So we have the Insight Hub, which is a really fantastic resource to all members. So we've got dedicated content hubs. It's research. There's a lot of research reports, good practice guides, guidance notes, and much, much more. There's a most recent guidance note, which I'll come to in a second. Next slide, please. We've got the sustainability survey, if you've not seen. If you would just want to scan that QR code there for me, you'll be able to discover the new report that we've got out as well. And this is the good practice guide, the most recent good practice guide that we've got out, which is really, really worthwhile and very relevant, as I'm sure you all agree. Energy Management GPG in partnership with Carbon Numbers. All of the good practice guides is on our website /insights. Sorry, I'm jumping between the slides there. A really good initiative that we're running at the moment. We've been running for a year. Do you know what? It might be a couple of years now, is the IWFM mentoring scheme. It's our one-to-one personal career support service which provides exclusive and inclusive benefits for members, so IWFM members. So if you do want to become a member, if you go onto our website, iwfm.org.uk, you'll be able to find out how you can become a member. The mentoring scheme is that website /mentoring. As soon as you've registered as a mentee, we'll pair you with a suitable mentor who has the knowledge, experience, and skills to help you guide and progress you within your career. Okay, next slide. Wonderful, thank you. And the Impact Awards, we have quite a few. We have a handful of additional award categories this year. The deadline for all nominees is the 10th of April. And again, you can you can check that out on our website and find out more with the at IWFM_awards on our social media platforms. We have a number of community group and forums. So if you want to go onto our website to find out more, obviously this webinar has been brought to you in association with the Water Hygiene Company, but also IWFM Midlands. I'm the chair for IWFM Midlands region. We are on the lookout for new members, so please go online, find me on LinkedIn, Sarah Awkward. I've got a very unusual surname, so it's going to be very difficult not to find me. And feel free to send me a DM if you're interested in joining the region committee group. There's a lot of benefits becoming a member. I appreciate that we have a mixture of members and non-members. I won't list all of them, they're all on the screen there, but if you want to go online and it's /membership to find out more about the benefits of becoming a member. Highly recommend it. There's a lot of different resources and support out there to help you develop within your professional network and within your profession in general. And that's all from us today. I hope you've enjoyed the webinar. If you, like I say, I'll share Pete's email address at the end, and we'll also collate all of the outstanding questions, circulate those with the answers, not too in the distant future. I'm not saying that very well, am I? Not too far in the distant future, should I say. Thank you very much for joining us today.